think about visual development jobs or concept art jobs, the first thing that comes to mind to people is like cool character design or cool background design. As cool as those jobs are, when you enter the industry, one of the first things that you're probably gonna do is prop design. I have an unpopular opinion, and it's that I really love my prop design. I think it's one of the things that I'm mostly known for, at least online. People seem to really like my props, and it's good because I really enjoy doing them. It's something that brings me a lot of joy. Hello, I'm Clarissa, and I am a professional visual development artist and background painter. I want to talk to you guys about how I paint my own props. You might have seen these kinds of like prop pages pop out in your Pinterest feed or Instagram, or you might have seen them on like all of these like cool art of books. Prop design is much more than just like painting a pretty object. Props are used in animation for so many things. They're so important. Whatever object character holds in a show or in a movie has to be designed. Whenever there's a weapon in a game, everything has to be designed. As per popular request, today I'm gonna show you how I do my prop sheets. I gotta say, I usually do these for fun. This is not the animation pipeline kind of way of painting props. I am gonna give you the process of how I make a prop by step, but I'm also going to do a full-on prop sheet, and I'm gonna go from like the easiest prop to like the most complicated ones, because some objects are easier than others. I divided my process into 6 big steps, and I'm gonna go over them one by one. First step when it comes to prop design, or whenever you want to create a prop sheet, is to find a story. It doesn't have to be super complicated. I usually go for things that resonate with myself. For example, I did one based on at a janitor's. I was at a janitor for a while, so I was inspired by that job. I already had a big background piece, and then I just expanded on that VizDev piece. So for this specific prop sheet, I wanted to do a 90s nostalgia themed kind of thing. Okay, let's say you have your theme, but you have no idea what kind of props you want to create. I have a method for that. So whenever I don't know which items to use for my prop sheet, I use a bubble map method. Very simple. I just write down my theme like in the middle. I do a little like bubble. Start kind of brainstorming on like the things that remind me of the theme, or like memories that I have from it. Method is cool because sometimes like some ideas lead to other ideas. Like for example, for the Rubik's Cube, I was like, oh, what if the Rubik's Cube is like not built? Or I don't know, I was like, oh, a Polaroid camera, and then I was like, oh, tech, Tamagotchi, or like foldable phone, things like that. Step 2, find good reference. I know everyone talks about this in every single video, but reference is super important. We are not superhumans with photographic memory. Reference is great. Some great ways to get reference, obviously online, but I really like taking pictures wherever I go, or of like little interesting things around the house, or maybe when you're out in the streets. Sometimes going to the dollar store is great, and just taking pictures of things that like maybe fit your theme. Great. Sometimes you can even use like objects that you have in your own room and use them as like real life reference instead of like having them on the screen. What I like about using Pinterest though is that like things take you to other things, so I feel that if I didn't use Pinterest, I wouldn't find like other objects that are like connected to the ones that I want to do. Step 3, find a style. And what do I mean by finding a style? Outlet online, there's a whole discourse of style, and beginner artists get super stressed about this. But what I mean about finding a style is to find like inspiration in other media. So For these prop sheets that I'm designing, or like the ones that I do myself, I'm very inspired by like the Spider-Verse, Alberto Mielgo, Patrick O'Keefe kind of style. I really like it. It's just what makes me happy, but every project will have like a different kind of style. And get inspired by other movies. Let's say Teenage Mutant Turtles has great prop design, Arcane has great style, just other media. But even you can get inspired by, I don't know, like Go, that's a good style that you could do for like props. Basically get inspired by any kind of like way of painting. There's no right or wrong in props.
The fourth step I take is to do silhouette studies. So instead of focusing on like perspective, color, and everything, I just go down and study everything in black and white. I try to make everything as readable as possible, as if I squint my eyes and I can read the shape, then I'm doing a good job. I try to exaggerate the shapes as much as I can, and then I try to time myself and try to keep these thumbnails to 5 to 10 minute max. I don't always use this method because sometimes I'm lazy and I just want to go straight to painting, but it's fine.
Now we're gonna get into the good stuff: sketch and perspective. Sketch obviously is not gonna be great. You can use your like black and white thumbnail to start off. Props, I like to have like a really strong perspective. Obviously it's something that takes a lot of practice, but what I find really useful is to use basically to break down everything in boxes. Perspective grids are great. A perspective grid in Procreate is great. One in Clip Studio. I can also show you how I do mine on like Photoshop.
But basically to have a strong sketch first so that you don't run into problems when you're painting.
Last step, paint. Straight up, I'm gonna show you my method of painting.
This is usually the longest step, but it's basically a lot of lasso tool and a lot of patience. So without further ado, let's jump into the speed paintings. So the first prop I decided to paint was a Rubik's Cube. This is because it doesn't really have a lot of complicated shapes and we don't have to be stressing about perspective. I always start off sketching with the perspective grid on Procreate or Clip Studio Paint. And I also use a hard round brush to avoid getting caught in details. Hi! So I wanted to take a moment to show you how I do my perspective grids on Clip Studio and Procreate. So here we are in Procreate, and I usually do a very rough sketch of the object that I want to do. Let's start off with a cube because it's the simplest one, and then what I do is that I turn down the opacity of the main layer, and then I create another layer, and then I go over here in the little one too, and then I go to, the actions cube, the actions menu, and then I turn on drawing guide, and then I go to edit drawing guide. It will immediately put you into the 2D grid. What we want is a perspective grid. And then over here, what I do is that I use first these main lines as like guidelines. And so we're doing a 3-point guide, and I'll explain you why. But let's do our first two vanishing points for the perspective first. So the first one, for props I usually go for a top-down view. And in order to do a top-down view, you have to have like a very high horizon line, so the first one I kind of put it around here, and I'm using my sketch as a kind of a guideline, and then I kind of put the point in this grid over here and use it as a reference for my second vanishing point, so it's exactly on the same horizon line. The second one I usually put it closer to the canvas, so I think that's a little bit too close, but I put it over here, and as you can see it kind of matches my sketch. And then for the third one, I'll show you actually how it looks with only 2 vanishing points. So in order to use the assisted drawing, you have to go press the layer that you want to have the perspective on, and then turn on drawing assist. So it's already assisted, and I use a very simple round brush for my sketches because I feel that it doesn't distract me from other things. So over here, you can see how it looks. There's nothing wrong with 2-point perspective. However, in props, I do feel that it makes them look kind of boring, kind of normal. But if we add a third vanishing point, it makes it look way more interesting. So same thing, we go to edit drawing guide, and then I zoom out a lot, and then I kind of eyeball this, put just the third vanishing point like around here, and I do like a little triangle. The closest it is to the canvas, the more exaggerated it's going to be. I kind of like it right here, like a perfect triangle. And then we use assisted drawing again. And then, I don't know if you can tell the difference, but I don't know. I just feel that it makes it look way more interesting, way more fun. And yeah, that's how you make grids on Procreate. And now I'm going to show you how I do them on Clip Studio. Okay, now we're in the Clip Studio interface, and we're going to do exactly the same thing I did in Clip Studio. But basically, we have the base sketch of our cube over here. And then I go over here to the ruler option and have perspective ruler on. In tool properties, you've got to have add vanishing point. Basically, I use one of these lines as a guideline. And then I go a little bit to the top, or like wherever I want to have my horizon line. I want it to be pretty up high. And I press shift and make a straight line. It's important to press shift because if you don't, the horizon line won't be perfectly horizontal, so that's very important. So there we have our first vanishing point. And then we'll do the second one, and I'll make a horizontal line like that again in the same point. And then we can even use another, like this line as a guideline. I try to zoom out a lot because sometimes the vanishing points are like very outside the canvas. Honestly, usually if you have a vanishing point inside the canvas and it's a 2-point perspective, that's not gonna be great. So yeah, I add the second vanishing point. So here we have the 2 vanishing points, and then for the third one, we do the exact same thing I did in Procreate. I just kind of eyeball it and just add it like wherever I do a little triangle, and then just like that, we have our 3-point perspective. And something I like about Clip Studio is that you can go to another layer, and it will always follow this perspective. And even when you're using like lasso tool or whatever, the lasso tool follows the perspective. If you have, let's say, a rectangle kind of lasso tool, it follows the perspective. And it's really easy to paint with this. And it's very easy and convenient. You can even do ellipses in perspective. Super quick, super easy. It's a great program to learn how to paint perspective properly. Even for me, the ellipses are kind of hard, but yeah, there you go. Okay, now back to the speed paint. Here I'm just finishing my sketch and I'm about to start painting. I like to block colors instead of like rendering right away. I block things out with the lasso tool, and I like starting with like a neutral color. I usually start with orange because people use orange or like burnt sienna as like underpaintings in like traditional painting, so I feel that it kind of mimics that. So I did the dark outlines first, that way I could just paint the Rubik's Cube colors underneath them without worrying that the colors will bleed off, and that way I didn't really have to select them. Then when it comes to painting the actual base colors of the object, I use the lasso tool, and then I like using a brush with color dynamics. So basically the brush changes color every single time I make a stroke. It makes the colors less bland, and it makes the prop more interesting, and it gives it that like Spider-Verse-y kind of style that I'm going for. Once the base colors are done, I start doing shadows and lights. So for shadows, whenever I have a lot of colors, I like using just plain old multiply. And then on top of the multiply layer, I do a screen layer or overlay with like a very lighter color. That way I have like a little bounce light, and it makes it look way more interesting. A big thing that I wanted to mention is that I tend to avoid using an airbrush, and I only use, whenever I want to do a gradient, I only use a brush with a little bit of opacity. That way it doesn't look very like ashy or muddy. You can achieve a lot with only 3 values. So I try to use the least amount of brush strokes for rendering. And it's a great exercise for beginners to avoid using a soft brush and just using a hard round brush. You don't really need fancy brushes to create very cool art. And I know I was talking about how you don't need brushes to do cool art. However, I do use the rake brush to add a little bit of texture. I use the Devin L. Kurtz's rake brushes and add them in like in a multiply layer to add a little bit of a Spider-Verse quality to the piece. I am careful though with these brushes. I try to not overuse them. Sometimes I just use one stroke in the whole prop. And yeah, whenever it's like a plastic element, I try to add these like reflections to it in a screen layer, kind of as if they had like something or like a window on top of it. And with that, the Rubik's Cube is done. Okay, and now moving on to the CD. My approach for the CD is very different from the other props. I don't really sketch for the CD. I kind of just make a circle object and just duplicate it and duplicate it and duplicate it. And kind of each time I duplicate it, I change the color for it with my little color changing brush. Whenever I'm painting a simple object like this, I try to approach it in a 2D way instead of a 3D way. So I just paint it flat as if it was like a flat image, and by the end of the prop I just skew it to make it look 3D. What makes a CD look complicated, it's its colorway, and what I do is that I kind of eyeball the colors and I just place them flat in the CD without a care in the world, because then we're gonna blur it with Gaussian blur. That way it makes it look very like reflective. Repeat the process until I'm happy with the colors. You can honestly do it as much as you want and it kind of helps it. Another thing I use in a lot of my props is the curves filter. I just basically place a lot of dots in the filter and kind of move them, and it makes the colors look more interesting. Yep. Okay, now for the lava lamp, favorite from Twitter. I use the symmetry tool to sketch. It's really useful for symmetrical objects. Yep. For this one, I painted a lot of metal, and for metal I tried to avoid using a lot of colors. For metal, you only really need 3 values, and basically the hack is to have the 2 mid-tones like to the sides, and then have the darkest and the lightest next to each other. Why? Don't ask me. I feel that it works, and I like how it looks, and I also try to have like a very light value in every edge, and it helps. For this, it's a lot of rendering, and I'll let you watch the rest. Okay, now for the water game. I never managed to win these things. Like, I felt that the little like air thingies never really like worked for me when I was a kid, and I kind of want to buy one now and see if I can beat it, but I think they're rigged. And as you can see, I am blocking out the shapes with cubes. Whenever there is an ellipse or anything rounded, I do a cube, and then I skew the ellipse into the cube, and that helps a lot with rounded things. It makes the circles very perfect. Okay, and then for any kind of typography in my props, I usually do them flat in another layer, and then I do the letters with the writing tool of the program. I try to make them interesting in a way, and something that always works is the famous like VizDev slant. For some reason, every VizDev artist does this to make things interesting. We just kind of skew things to the right, as you can see. It makes it really cool, I don't know, and then we skew it to the perspective, and that's why the sketch works. For this case, it was a little bit rounded, so I used one of like the transform tools in Procreate to kind of make it curved. From here on, it's just rendering. It's the same process: lasso tool, a little bit of like a color dynamics brush, and then 2 or 3 strokes for a light and a shadow. And yeah, enjoy. now onto our last prop. I honestly really struggled with this one. Even for me, it was a little bit hard, but I pushed through. And for this one, I feel that the sketch was the most complicated part, since it has a lot of like sections. So as you can see, I divided everything in cubes as much as I could. And as you can see in basically all of my props, I don't really zoom into my props that much. I try to be as zoomed out as I can, because people are only really going to stay in your drawing for around 4 seconds, 7 seconds if you're lucky. So it doesn't really matter if, like, the amount of detail you add. You can honestly just fake detail by implying the detail. A way to do that is to kind of like squint your eyes, and the important things that you see in the prop is what you're gonna paint. Your props, and just like any drawing in general, has to be read immediately and very clearly, even from afar. If people can't read it from afar but can only read it zooming in, then you're doing something wrong. So that's kind of why I go from the biggest shapes then to the smaller shapes. And yeah, I'll just let you watch the rest of the speed paint, and then we're going to be finishing the video. Thank you for joining, guys.
Okay, and without further ado, this is the final prop sheet. Yes, I added a couple more props because I felt that it was a little bit empty in a couple of spots, so I added a little bubble gum, and I like how it looks. It's not my favorite prop sheet, but I hope that it was helpful for you guys. I really hope that you guys liked the video, and I hope that it was helpful, and I hope that it helps you guys with your own business projects or your own personal work. And if you have any more ideas for any future videos, I would love to hear them out in the comments. And yeah, feel free to subscribe for more content soon. And yeah, see you next time. Thank you so much for joining. Goodbye.